Okay, if you missed class on Thursday with the coffee morning, we were looking at the people involved in Hitler's rise to the chancellorship. And we start off looking at Hermann Muller. And the collapse of Muller's Grand Coalition is seen as the end of Weimar democracy. Muller's Grand Coalition was made up of five parties headed by the SPD. Muller was a socialist, and with the onset of the Great Depression, Muller's government struggled to agree on how to deal with the effects of the Depression, namely the growing unemployment. So in 1932, Muller went to Hindenburg with a finance bill and told Hindenburg that he could not get the parties in government to agree to it, so that Hindenburg would then have to pass it by Article 48. But Hindenburg refused, and Muller was left with no option but to resign, and he was replaced by Henrik Brüning. Henrik Brüning was from the Centre Party. He was an economist and an ex-army officer in the First World War. His aim during his time in office was to use the Great Depression to actually get the Allies to end reparation repayments. He thought he could use the crisis that Germany was in to get reparations stopped completely. He also wanted to dismantle the welfare state in Germany. So during his time, his policy of austerity meant that he would cut wages, he cut services, cut unemployment benefits, and raise taxes. And this put a lot of strain on people who were already suffering greatly. So Brüning then is remembered as the Hunger Chancellor for this reason. By 1932, there were 6 million people unemployed. About 40% of German businesses had shut. Half of all 16 to 30-year-olds were unemployed. So it was a desperate situation. And in the September 1930 elections, you see the results down here. You can see huge rises for the Nazi Party and not so impressive rise, but still a rise all the same for the Communist Party. So the extremists were gaining during Brüning's chancellorship. During this period as well, there was also the election for president, and Hindenburg, who at this stage was in his early 80s, was asked or convinced to stand again by Henrik Brüning. And it was a close run thing with Hitler standing against him. Hitler achieved 13.5 million votes, with Hindenburg achieving 19, being forced to a second ballot. This was an embarrassment for the president, and in some ways he held Brüning responsible for the disaster, for the embarrassment of the presidential election. So, taking it forward then, in in May 1932, Brüning is forced to resign. He's forced to resign over the issue of giving out bankrupt Prussian estates to the members of the unemployed. He felt that this was a way of stopping people falling into the hands of communists and Nazis. If he could give bankrupt estates to the unemployed, he may sort of turn the situation around. But this didn't sit well with Hindenburg, who felt that he called it agro-communism or agro-Bolshevism. Okay. So Brüning is forced to resign, and Franz von Papen takes the helm. Now, Franz von Papen's government is known as the Cabinet of Barons because it had no members of the Reichstag in it. Bizarrely, a government without anybody in it who's elected by the people. Franz von Papen was a monarchist and no friend of democracy, and he felt that he could use the Nazi strength within the Reichstag to get changes made to the constitution, which would water down, if you like, the democratic elements of the Weimar Constitution. He tried to build a coalition with the Nazis, but the Nazis refused to work with any other party. And on the first day that Papen was in the Reichstag, the Nazis and communists walked out, leaving Papen no other option but to call an election. So an election was held in July 1932, and it was a disaster for Papen. as the Nazis polled 230 seats, making them the largest party in the Reichstag. And you can see that there were significant gains for the communists as well. Papen struggled on for another few months. However, the situation he was in was impossible. He asked Hindenburg could he rule by Article 48. Hindenburg said he needed the support of the Reichstag, so another election was called. This time, the Nazi vote did fall, possibly because people had seen that even as the largest party in the Reichstag, Hindenburg had refused to make Hitler the Chancellor. So that could be one reason. Another possible reason is that by November 1932, the economic situation was actually starting to improve and unemployment was falling. So that figure is significant, but you can see that there was a substantial rise again for the communists. And we heard a figure somewhere that the Communist Party's membership had increased to about 6 million by the end of 1932. So communism is a big threat here, and we've got to keep in mind that a lot of these people possibly feared communism more than they feared Hitler. So, having failed to get a Reichstag that could work with him, Papen was forced to resign, and Kurt von Schleicher, an army officer, was appointed in his place. Schleicher had promised Hindenburg that he could get the Nazis to cooperate with him, but again, he faced the same problem that von Papen had. Adolf Hitler refused to agree to any deal that would mean that the Nazi Party would be constrained in a coalition with other parties. So again, Schleicher failed. He tried to get Gregor Strasser on side by offering Gregor Strasser the vice chancellorship, but he failed in that as well. In the final week of January 1933, the situation was dire. There was no government. The chancellors were unable to gain any support within the Reichstag. The Reichstag wasn't even meeting anymore. Violence in the street between communists and the SA was reaching critical levels, and many people feared that there was going to be a bloody revolution. At this point, Papen and Oskar Hindenburg, President Hindenburg's son, met with President Hindenburg and persuaded him that Hitler could be tamed and that they could use Hitler to bring the situation under control. Before this, in the background, Papen had been meeting Hitler, and he and Hitler made a deal that if Hitler was given the chancellorship, von Papen would be his vice chancellor, and the Nazis would be allowed 4 ministers in a government. Hitler agreed to this. He probably realised that this is the best he could do now, once he had seen that his election figures were starting to fall. So they approached Hindenburg. Hindenburg was also under pressure from industrialists such as Fritz Thyssen, Krupp, and Heilmar Schacht. You'll come across these names again. And so he was under pressure from all these sides to try and resolve the situation and try to prevent a revolution. So eventually, on the 30th of January 1933, Hindenburg appointed Hitler as Chancellor of Germany.